And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Helms.
Thank you, Allison. And for those who haven't been following the director's cut before, the reason in February that we're talking about December production is the way production is reported in North Dakota. So after the wells produce for a month, the oil companies are given a month to gather their data together and then file it with the Industrial Commission. And so that creates the lag. So December production was filed beginning February 1 with the agency. And then it takes us 10 days or so to compile it and get it all together before we do the director's cut. So we're talking about being frozen in the month of December. We had talked a month ago anticipating that this might happen because we knew what the weather in December had been. And so sure enough, we really went back on trend and we lost 92,000 barrels a day between November and December. A very large production drop. Not only did oil production go down 9%, but natural gas production went down 13%. Over 222 million cubic feet a day drop in natural gas production. Almost all of that is weather related. When we look at the weather reports, we had 3 significant snowfall events. The first one, the first week of December, then just before the middle of December, and then again right at Christmas time. And along with that, tremendous high winds. We had half of the month, 15 days, when the wind blew above 35 miles an hour. And above that wind speed, they cannot use workover rigs or do hydraulic fracturing. So that caused some problems. We also had 9 days when the temperature dropped to lower than -10. And so that inhibits hydraulic fracturing and well completions as well. Surprisingly, amongst all of that, they completed 81 new wells. I don't know how effective those completions were in terms of adding production, but they did hydraulically fracture 81 new wells in the midst of all that. When you look at the well numbers, that means that 81 new wells came on, 264 existing wells were shut in. And you saw the picture that Allison provided. That was typical of those 264 wells where they plowed the road out just to get in there and safely close the well down. Talking with the trucking companies who move a lot of this oil, they say that January is going to be similar in production. Not a similar production drop, but similar in production is what they anticipate. Maybe a slight drop, maybe a slight increase, but not another 90,000 barrel a day drop in January. The downside of all that is it's beginning to thaw out there, and with the thaw come what we call road restrictions. We're one of the few states where that happens. The frost goes out of the ground, the roads become too soft to carry 105,000 pound semis, and so travel with heavy trucks is restricted. Those restrictions often stay in place until around Mother's Day. And so this production loss is going to linger into the second quarter of the year. And we won't see it turn around for quite some time. We gained 58 unconventional wells. We lost 238 conventional wells, the older historic legacy producing wells. And I guess that wouldn't be any surprise with the economics and the weather that we had. I think it's kind of exciting that the number of uncompleted wells went down slightly, and we had the 81 completions. That just really is an indicator that the $50 West Texas Intermediate oil price is creating a very strong drive for companies to complete those wells. And phone conversations yesterday with a couple of those companies indicated that that's absolutely the case. They are going to add as many frac crews as they can add this summer and work on that 800 well inventory of uncompleted wells. One company in particular, Continental Resources, has the largest uncompleted well inventory. They're committed to running 6 frac crews as soon as they can get them in the field and get that inventory down by about 2/3. So that should help when we get into the middle of the year. Interestingly enough, Fort Berthold went the other direction, gained 2 drilling rigs, gained 300 barrels a day, and actually gained 27 active wells. And so a little bit out of sync with the rest of the oil patch out there. That's probably where a lot of the completions took place, and that is some of the best geology in the Bakken and Three Forks. So it makes sense that companies would focus their efforts there. But that's an interesting little side note. I want to talk a little bit about gas flaring, because we lost ground on gas flaring. We went from 11% of our gas flared to 14%. Now, statewide, that's still within the goal or the limit that the Industrial Commission has set of 15% flaring maximum statewide. But we did have an area on Fort Berthold where the flaring went to 16%. It was in excess of the state goals. So let's talk a little bit about what happens there. That was in large part due to winter weather again. I talked to one of our, well, actually two of our gas plant operators within the last week, and in both cases they had lots of lines freeze up and plug off. Lots of gas went to flare that they would have liked to gotten to their gas plants, but they just couldn't get it there. And that's what we saw at Robinson Lake, north of Newtown, and at Partial. Was the gas was stranded in the field. It couldn't get to the gas plants. So the first thing that these operators have done is they've used up the credits that they built up. When they were doing better than the Industrial Commission requirement, they were able to accumulate credits for gas flaring, and they've used those up. And then they ask their gas gatherer for a force majeure letter, meaning I wanted to, I was prohibited by weather or mechanical failures or whatever of being able to gather your gas. And then finally, once they burn through that, they'll have to go to production restrictions. So far, we haven't identified any operators that are going to have production restrictions as a result of December, but they've all used up all their credits and their force majeure. So it's likely that the January production could result in some, or the January flaring could well result in some production restrictions. We'll just have to see how that plays out. On the federal side, only a couple of areas moving. You've probably been following the Bureau of Land Management venting and flaring rule. North Dakota sued to get an injunction against that rule. The judge ruled against North Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming, did not grant the preliminary injunction, but the U.S. House has voted to invoke the CRA, the Congressional Review Act. Yeah, I was searching for that R word, and that's over on the Senate side now. If the Senate votes to do that, then that rule will be killed, and BLM will not be able to promulgate a substantially similar rule in the future. So the Senate's supposed to take that up this week. So yet this week, they're supposed to take that up on the floor, and we'll see how that goes. The other thing on the federal side is the PHMSA, Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA. They have announced an advanced proposal for rulemaking to lower the vapor pressure on crude oil transported in the country. And so there's a comment period on that. It ends March 20th. The Industrial Commission will be looking at some comments next Monday to submit based on that PHMSA rulemaking. And as you know, the Industrial Commission has oil conditioning rules in place. North Dakota has set a vapor pressure of 13.7. The PHMSA Advanced Notice of Rulemaking is contemplating a vapor pressure of 9, which is vastly different, and a different type of vapor pressure measurement, a read vapor pressure instead of a crude oil vapor pressure. So we'll be submitting comments on that. Finally, we're providing new break-even prices for North Dakota counties. We try to do that once a quarter. They haven't changed a lot. Divide County went up about $6 a barrel probably as a result of some poorer wells being brought in Divide County. The well performance is down a little bit. Mound Trail gained $5 a barrel. Some better wells coming in Mound Trail, but not a lot of change. Statewide, it's economic it's break-even economic to drill wells at $18 a barrel in North Dakota. So very, very significant numbers, and but not a lot of change from a quarter ago. So the lower prices for wells and fracking are still in the mix. Well performance has improved a little bit, and oil prices are about the same place they were 3 months ago. So with that, we'll take questions. Obviously, the big story is the weather. And December and January, horrible weather in North Dakota. Very, very difficult to produce oil. And we saw a 92,000 barrel a day production decline. That's going to affect state revenues. It's going to affect the state revenue forecast. The legislature is going to have to work with. And it's going to affect the bottom line, the cash flow for oil companies.
Okay, so what we'll typically do is we take questions from the webinar and we try to rotate between the webinar and the conference room. Just a couple quick notes. Most of you will probably be writing, I'm assuming, on the production drop, but if you do write about the PHMSA vapor pressure rule and you need a refresher as far as what our rule does, we have an FAQ on our website under our guidance policies portion of our website, so that can give you a little compare and contrast as far as what our rule does and how we got to that rule. So the first question we have on the webinar, if frac crews pick up possibly this summer, when would that show up in production, in the production numbers, and do you have an idea of that's what you expect that supply jump to be when it does show up in the numbers? Okay,
so frac crews are scheduled, as soon as they can really put them to work. There's already demand for the frac crews. Halliburton has held a job fair in Williston, and the folks at Job Service North Dakota in Williston say that they're getting lots of orders to recruit people for hydraulic fracturing. The anticipation is that most of those crews will go in the field in the May-June timeframe. So we won't see the results of that until probably July production. It'll be in the next fiscal year, and it'll be after mid-year into the third quarter of 2017. The expectation is that we'll complete, or the industry will complete, about 700 wells fiscal 17 and jump to 1,000 wells. So a 50% increase in well completions in fiscal 18. And when you talk about that, that is a lot of people pumping enormous volumes of water and sand. So there's going to be a lot of truck traffic starting in May and running probably through October, November of this year. Should show up in the July production.
Okay.
Do you guys know about approximately when the last time once you guys had a drop of about this number, roughly, if ever?
Yeah, the question from the room was when, if ever, have we had a drop approaching this number, and the answer would be never. This is the largest drop we've ever had. And I think the next largest was around 50,000 barrels a day. It was,
and 70, I think it was.
Did we have a 70,000 barrel a day drop?
April or March of last year. Let me.
That would have been around the time, closing in on the time when we wanted our million first time, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me see if I can find it. And
we'll look that up for you, but this is the largest drop ever. And we did have a 70,000 barrel a day decline. Let me make a note of that.
Also, do you know about approximately how long it took for those well sites to be, dug out, got into, be able to be shut in? I think it was the 264 or whatever the number was.
Correct. The question was returning those 264 wells to production. And the report that I'm getting from the field is that those wells remain down in January. And as a result of being shut down for more than a month, Many of them are going to require a workover rig. They probably will not be returned to production again until May or June. So they will remain in the inactive category for probably 5 or 6 months, and that's going to put a real strain or downward constraint on production. But many of them are going to need a workover rig now to bring them back on.
What are some of the challenges companies are having with rapid thaw?
Question was about rapid thaw, and the challenges that they're really having is the road beds getting soft. Beginning in 2010 for sure, maybe a little bit earlier, companies started really paying a lot of attention to engineering the well pads. And so we had started to see around that time a lot of stabilization materials added to the subsoil and that sort of thing to improve the well pads. And so the well pads themselves are in pretty good shape. The roads are in tough shape. One of the things that we did regulatory-wise was in 2012, we put in the rule requiring companies to put up berms or dikes to divert drainage off the well pads. That's going to be one of the challenges, is trying to keep the snow melt off the well pad. Once it gets on there, then you have to get a discharge permit and deal with it as though it's stormwater. So if you can divert it off the well pad. So the two challenges really are making sure the snow melt stays off the well pad and the roads.
Any idea about workover rigs in Williams County? How does that relate to increased activity?
No, I don't have any information on increased workover rig activity in Williams County. I can say that we've been following the NOAA flood warning, and there is a high probability of flooding in the Souris River Valley and also in the Missouri River Valley west of Williston. So we have notified all the operators to get out there and maintain surveillance on their wells. Some of those wells, as you recall, in 2011 flooded, and so we have an agreement with the oil companies that those wells will be shut in as soon as the flood danger arises. And in other cases, the diking was built up. So we're really on flood watch now.
Just for everyone to know, the last time we had a significant drop in production was roughly 70,000 barrels a day from March to April of 2016. Can you get into what accounts for the low break-even prices in Dunn, McKenzie, and McLean counties? Is it lower prices for rigs, supplies, service? What makes up for that?
Yeah, to some extent, it's reduced well cost, but more than anything, it's the well performance. When I ran through those counties and looked at well performance, in every single case, the average initial production for the wells was almost 2,000 barrels a day. And so the very high initial production rates really drive that low break even. And so it's almost entirely well performance. In addition to that core area, companies have begun doing almost exclusively what they call the super fracs. So they've gone to 50-stage frac jobs with 10 million gallons or so of water and 8 million pounds of sand. So the combination of much larger stimulations and much higher initial production.
Have companies relayed, like, you know, to what extent that may have impacted their budgets, you know, having to deal with the response to the snow events in December? I mean, I would guess that probably had a significant impact on their budgets in the short term.
Yeah, the question was, have companies indicated the budget impact of the snow and the shut-in wells? And I don't have any hard numbers for you. I can tell you that the typical North Dakota well at 27 barrels a day wasn't economic to plow the road out more than once in December just to shut the well in. And so the snow movement costs were very substantial, and the companies chose to only do it once. Maybe a good example would be that our landlord here at the Bismarck office talked about snow removal, and the snow removal from our little parking lots here completely consumed his profit for 2016. So I think that's a pretty good comparison. Is on a 27 barrel a day well. If they were going to try to keep that thing operating, they would have consumed all of 2016 profits, and so they chose to just plow it once and shut the well in. On a cash flow basis, we're looking across the board at about a 10% drop in cash flow, and that's going to play itself out in probably less drilling and less fracking in the second half of this year. So that will push, maybe 10% of that activity into 2018.
Can you talk a little bit about, do you have a problem?
Yeah,
Oh.
the microphone sheet.
I was blinking at you.
It sure is. Sorry about that. No problem.
Oh, wait.
Good as new. Thanks.
Can you talk a little bit about how production drop combined with low prices affects the state budget and revenue estimates, and then also what's the price level for revenue estimates?
Okay. Actually, the revenue forecast for December was built on roughly 950,000 barrels a day and $48 North Dakota crude oil price. So we almost hit it exactly in terms of December production and price forecast. I think the difference between a little bit better price than what we forecast and a little bit lower oil, it was almost spot on. This does mean, though, that it's going to be very difficult, maybe impossible, for the legislature to look out through the 17-19 biennium and increase that 900,000 barrel a day production forecast or the $48 a barrel price forecast that they have built into the revenue forecast. So it's going to tend to cement that lower revenue forecast in place. And I would expect that we'll be moving forward with that. One of the things that we spent some time yesterday talking with our revenue forecasting group about is the sales tax. It still is not matching up with the activity. And so there's a lot of work going on between now and when the revenue forecasting group meets to try to unravel why sales tax is doing what it's doing. Because the sales tax, even for the oil, gas, and mining industry and the wholesale group, did not match up with the 81 completions that we had in December. So there's a lot of research going on there, and I don't have the answers yet at this point.
What kind of timetable is there for kind of recovering some of this lost ground on natural gas? Is it pretty similar to oil production, or might that be able to recover a little quicker with the weather?
Yeah, the question was, making up the lost ground on natural gas and oil. I think based on what we're hearing from operators about the eagerness to complete wells the second half of this year, we could actually see production bottom out mid-year and begin to climb a little bit in at least by the fourth quarter of this year in terms of oil production. Natural gas should be able to turn around quicker than that. The infrastructure is in place. It was more a matter of mechanical problems and freezing problems with that infrastructure. So as soon as we have warm weather, we ought to see that natural gas thing turn around. There does seem to be, and I got a call last week, there appears to be some lingering problems with the Robinson Lake plant, and so I don't know exactly when that's going to work itself out, but the warm weather should bring a very quick turnaround in natural gas.
I guess kind of a quick follow-up as well. Has there been any reports or anything about any of those lines having any problems after freezing? Is there any risk of perhaps any breaks, ruptures, anything like that when things warm up, or should it be in good shape?
Yeah, great question. Have there been any reports of, infrastructure damage or problems due to the freezing? And we have not heard of any difficulties with equipment being damaged or destroyed as a result of the freezing. A lot of methanol is being pumped to try to remove the ice from those lines, and most of them didn't completely freeze off. What happened was they built up ice that restricted the diameter of the pipe, and so they were just unable to get the full capacity of gas through. So it didn't completely freeze up and burst the pipe. It just cut the pipe diameter maybe in half, and so they couldn't get the volume of gas through.
Okay, this will be the last question from the webinar, and it's borderline, but it's asking about production, so I will allow it.
Oh, yeah.
With Dakota Access construction underway again, do you expect that to have any impact on production or rig count?
We do, and that's really not a bad question. Talking again with operators, the existing production, 940,000 barrels a day, roughly, is going to see a benefit of $1 to $2 per barrel in terms of realized North Dakota price. So we expect that transportation differential, the difference between WTI and North Dakota crude, to drop by between $1 and $2 for existing production. The really significant factor is that incremental production, the kind of production we would get from all these frac jobs or from drilling rigs, if we were to have substantial incremental production, that would have to go on a rail car. And the difference between Dakota Access and a rail car is more like $9 a barrel. So very significant difference in terms of people's choices of whether to employ a drilling rig or to frac these uncompleted wells. And so it has some, not insignificant, but some effect on existing production. It has a very large effect on the desire to drill and frac new wells.
Okay. All right. With that, we will switch gears to Mr. Kringstad. So please stay on the line, folks.
Turn the power on?
Yeah. Yeah. That one, this one? Oh. Oh. Okay. Oh, yeah, you know what? Yeah, sorry.
What's up? 4. Perfect.
All right.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Justin Kringstad, Director of the North Dakota Pipeline Authority. We'll just get right into a production update. We've seen the discussion about the winter weather. As far as production goes around the basin, we still don't have eastern Montana production to report. In the analysis and the estimates that I've done for this event, I assume that Montana held relatively steady. We'll see what type of impact their industry had as a result of the storm, and I'll make adjustments in future months if necessary. On the overall transportation of crude oil out of the region, we've seen some more shifting towards the pipeline network versus the rail network. We're continuing to see high percentages, or relatively high compared to historical averages, of truck traffic into Canada out of the region, and so we'll touch on that here in a moment. When we look at the historical trend, we're continuing to see the pipeline industry gain market share over the rail industry. Again, market conditions driving that as well as production levels in the region. The estimates for overall crude by rail leaving is now down again in the month of December, just above 200,000 barrels per day estimated to be leaving the region by rail car. The destination of those rail cars continues to shift as well. This is November information. This is the latest available from the EIA. We've now seen the West Coast shift as the major destination for crude by rail out of North Dakota. It's no longer the East Coast as it was for many years. The West Coast now is the dominant destination for those barrels leaving by rail car. When we look at pricing in November, again, this is what refineries are paying around the U.S. For their crude oil. Continuing to see PADD 1 the East Coast and PADD 5 on the West Coast having the highest priced on average what the refineries were paying, followed up by the Gulf Coast and then the Midwest and the Rocky Mountain regions. Pricing as we see it today, again, just under a $3 spread between Brent and WTI. Again, using that as an indicator for that shuffle between pipe and rail for barrels that do have that flexibility to move around. At a $2.73 spread, I don't anticipate any major shifts from the current situation. I continue to see the pipeline industry be the preferred choice out of the region, and then using rail as an alternative for those barrels, again, that have that flexibility, that aren't previously committed to rail and by a refinery on the east or west coasts. The truck traffic, I know last month we saw a large spike up in truck traffic out of North Dakota into Canada. That's come down slightly, but still above historic trends that we've seen. So we're still seeing a lot of barrels being trucked just north of the border. At that point, the assumption is that they're getting onto a pipeline system, but however, we don't have any type of additional data to tell us exactly where those barrels are headed and what the exact market reason for that is. And we also saw the imports jump as well. And so some of those trucks that are coming over the border going north are also coming back likely with some crude on board. Again, likely for marketing reasons, depending upon the different crude grades and what the pricing and what the value is in both marketplaces. So again, we'll continue to watch this and see if this is going to be some type of longer term trend or just a marketing situation that folks are using for the last couple months. On the natural gas side, again, as Lynn alluded to, the amount of gas flared in December did rise. The market share, the percentage shift was largely in that orange piece of the pie. So again, as Lynn alluded to, challenges on the gas gathering infrastructure that simply didn't have enough capacity to move all the molecules to the gas plant. And so they were able to capture some of the gas, but because of operational constraints, again, some of that gas was diverted to flare rather than continuing on down the gas gathering line. And we'll just bump ahead to slide 13. Gas connections, as Lynn alluded to, a relatively high number of well completions. The gas gathering industry was able to keep up on pace. So they, again, this is a good metric that we follow to see, is drilling outpacing the midstream's ability to get wells connected? And in this case, no, the midstream industry was able to keep up with new wells being brought online. And on the natural gas liquid side, November is the most recent we have available, but likely when the December numbers come out, natural gas liquids production will also be down from the gas plants with the lower input volumes coming from the fields. And so next month we'll really see the impact on the NGL side of the December weather. But in November, the most recent we had relatively stable NGL production, but that will be going down in the month of December. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
The rail numbers have kind of started to plummet, it looks like, again in recent months. Looks like we're starting to approach some of those really low numbers at the onset of the boom. Do you think we might actually reach those lows again, or do you think it'll level off at some point in the future?
Yeah, so the question was about trying to figure out where rail goes from here. Does it continue its downward trend? The answer is really, it's going to depend on what happens with production. If we continue to see production slide in the next few months, likely we'll see some of these rail volumes slide. If we see production hold even, we may see rail volumes hold even. And again, market prices and market conditions are also driving that decision-making process as well. So again, if production holds steady and if market conditions stay where they are today, we'll likely see that rail volume start to level off a little bit.
I think this has been asked before as well, but with Dakota access, could that accelerate that as well long-term? Or?
It could. And so, as additional pipeline capacity comes online, those barrels, it gets competitive between those shippers. And so, if there's barrels committed to a pipeline system that comes online, then those barrels will go that direction. If there are barrels that are still committed to a rail route and a rail destination, they'll stay there. So, but anytime a new project comes online, it does shift the marketplace.
It's quiet on the webinar, so you might be getting off the hook easy this month.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.